In this lesson, we'll help you become familiar with the layout of DesignR PRO 2. Being familiar with the layout will help you to navigate around the program. This is especially helpful as we progress through the rest of the DesignR PRO 2 video. Now in this lesson, we'll cover such things as the pull-down menus, the toolbars, the color palettes, the smart bar, the rulers and workspace. If you have not already done so, open the DesignR PRO 2 software now. This is done by clicking on Start, All Programs, then clicking the DesignR PRO 2 folder, and then selecting the DesignR PRO 2 icon. To get familiar with the layout of the application, we can start with the pull-down menus at the top of the window. The pull-down menus work the same as other Windows applications you may have worked with. They contain all the different DesignR PRO 2 functions. The pull-down menu options are generally grouped by functionality. For instance, functions such as undo, redo, cut, and paste are used when editing a design. Thus, these functions are located under the Edit pull-down menu group. On the other hand, all the functions and options for cutting are under the Cut pull-down menu. When looking for a certain function, try to imagine what it would be grouped under, and that's the quickest way to find your function that you're looking for. To save time, notice that some of the items and functions have shortcut keys assigned to them, and they're displayed on the right-hand side of each pull-down menu. Shortcut keys are the easiest way to those functions without having to search the pull-down menus. For instance, if you're new to the software, you'll probably end up undoing your steps. This is generally done by clicking on the Edit pull-down menu and then clicking Undo. But you'll notice that it has two shortcut keystrokes assigned to it. So instead of going through the Edit pull-down menu and selecting Undo, just hold the Alt key and then press Backspace, or hold down the Control key and then press Z. Once again, shortcut keystrokes are very common with other Windows applications you may have worked with, but it's a good habit to get to know these shortcut keys as soon as you can to speed up the design process. Next are the toolbars. Toolbars are buttons along the top and side of the window. These buttons, called either tool or functions, are grouped together based upon the similarity of their functions. These toolbars are designed to give you quick access to commonly used tools and functions. When DesignR PRO 2 is started for the first time, it will give you access to 4 different toolbars: the System toolbar, the Operations toolbar, the Workspace toolbar, and then the Tools toolbar. The System toolbar has functions that have everything to do with the system. Functions such as New, Open, Save, Import, Export, Undo, Redo, and Exit. For instance, if starting a new design, we would click on the New button. To open a file, we would click Open. To save a file, we would click Save, and so on. Design files from graphic applications such as CorelDRAW, Photoshop, or Photoshop Elements can be imported to a design you're working on in DesignR PRO 2. Similarly, designs can be exported from DesignR PRO 2 using the Export function. The Workspace toolbar has functions that pertain to anything within the workspace. That's this main area here. The workspace is where the design is worked on. The Workspace functions help us to adjust the workspace so that we have an easier time working with our designs. For instance, the grid lines that you see may be too busy for you, and therefore be too distracting. Well, they can be turned off. If you like working with strictly outlines, the design shape fills can be turned on or off, as need be. The Operations toolbar has functions or tools commonly used for manipulating your objects of the design. Tools that will move, resize, rotate, slant, or mirror objects. The toolbar on the left is considered the main toolbar. It contains different tools and functions for creating and manipulating designs. Tools such as the text tools for creating lettering, the shape tools for making shapes, graphic edit tools for drawing lines, and scanning and vectorizing tools. It also contains tools for selecting, zooming in and out, and the stroke and fill tools as well. Each toolbar can float. In other words, they can be dragged to the center and moved around. Once the toolbar is floating, it could then be resized. Floating the toolbar is a great way of accessing certain tools that are used repeatedly. Once you're done using the floating toolbar, it can be parked by double-clicking on it, or dragging it to the side area of the window. When dragging the toolbar back to its parked position, it'll change shape, indicating that it's ready to be parked, and the mouse button can be released. Toolbars can be turned on or off as needed. This is done by clicking on the View pull-down menu and then hovering over toolbars. Toolbars that are available will be displayed. Each can be turned on or off just by clicking one of the toolbars. A check mark next to a toolbar indicates that it's currently displaying. While we're in this menu, notice further down the menu an option where the toolbars can be customized. While this area will be covered in the tips and tricks lesson, if we click on Customized, this window appears. At the bottom of the window is the choice of size we would like to have our buttons or icons to be. Click on the pull-down button and there is a choice of small, medium, large, and large and medium. Large and medium will set the main toolbar as large and the other toolbars as medium. For this training session, we'll leave the size as medium for right now. To select a tool is a matter of clicking on that button. Some of the buttons have little arrows next to the tool icon. This indicates that the button is a tool group. In other words, the button contains a group of tools with similar functionality. These are known as flyout toolbars. To reveal a flyout toolbar, click on a button that has a little arrow, and an extended toolbar will fly out, so to speak. Once the flyout toolbar appears, you can choose the tool that you need. These flyout toolbars are similar to the other toolbars in that they can float, be reshaped, move them, just click on the workspace and they disappear. Or if they are floating, click on the main button from where they originated, and then click on the workspace. At the top, above the toolbars but below the pull-down menu, is the Smart Bar. The Smart Bar displays the parameters, values, or settings of a selected tool, shape, or function. This means that the Smart Bar will continually change depending on the current operation. As we go along in this video, it will become apparent as to the usefulness of this bar, but to briefly demonstrate, if we click on the circle tool for instance, the Smart Bar will immediately display all the settings affecting the circle, such as the exact X and Y position, the radius, or size of the circle. Because of this, the Smart Bar is particularly good if you need more accurate settings to adjust the shape, rather than just adjusting the shape visually. When an object is selected using the Selector tool, which we'll discuss later, the object's general information such as the size and position will display in the Smart Bar. But as mentioned before, this will all be covered in later lessons. Next is the workspace. As mentioned, the workspace is where you will create your designs. This is where you'll draw your shapes and objects. The dark black border is called the sign blank. The sign blank border can represent the area in which you need to fit your design. For example, let's say that you have a signboard on which you need to place some vinyl lettering. The sign's dimensions can be adjusted or set up to the size of that actual signboard as represented by the sign blank. To turn the sign blank off, click the sign blank button in the workspace toolbar. On the top and left of the workspace are the rulers. Rulers can help us visually see the dimensions of each shape. The rulers can be changed. If we click on the ruler, we're given a choice of the type of measurement unit, whether we want inches or millimeters, where we want to position the rulers, and whether we want to hide or show the rulers. If we hide the rulers, they can be turned on again by clicking on the View pull-down menu and selecting Show Rulers. Pressing Alt-R on your computer keyboard can also turn them on. There are times, though, when it is hard to judge the size and location of an object by using the rulers themselves. What is handy is that guidelines can be created from the rulers. To place a guideline, right-click on the ruler. Once a guideline is created, it can be repositioned by clicking on it and then dragging it to a different position. Each guideline can be set at an angle if need be by clicking and dragging on the handles at each end of the guidelines. Earlier we talked a little about the grid lines. They are the gray lines forming a grid pattern in the workspace. And as mentioned, on the workspace toolbar, this button here will turn the grid on and turn it off. The grid is a nice feature to work with when creating or manipulating objects or shapes, and the button next to it will help in that. It will enable Snap to Grid. Snap to Grid will ensure that anytime we click on the workspace to manipulate or create an object, it will automatically snap each point to the nearest grid point. To briefly demonstrate this, let's enable the Snap to Grid and then draw a rectangle. And as you'll notice, as we start to draw the rectangle, they're automatically snapping to the grid points. If you find that you like using grid, but you would like to change the grid from a line pattern to a dot pattern so that they are less busy, this is done by clicking on the Options pull-down menu, selecting Grid, and deselecting or unchecking the Show Grid as Line option. The workspace will now display a dot pattern. It's a little hard to see, so let's zoom into the workspace. And the dots, which are not dots at all but little crosshairs, are located where the grid lines intersected. Within DesignR PRO 2, when referring to the position, it often uses X and Y values. These values are based upon the X and Y coordinates of the workspace. The X are the coordinates in the horizontal direction, and the Y are the coordinates in the vertical direction. Both coordinates are based upon the 0, 0 point here in the middle of the workspace. When an object is moved to a certain coordinate, like X being 2 and Y being 2, it will move the anchor point to that coordinate. Watch for this as we move along. All objects in the workspace have a fill color. If you need to turn the fill on or off, just click on the Show Fill button and all objects will have a simplified view of just an outline. This is true with the line style. If an object's outline has a thickness, this too can be turned off and on by clicking on the Line Style button. Down below the workspace is the color palette. The color palette will be covered in more detail in another lesson, but here is where both the fill and line color of selected shapes can be changed in our design. Now the way this works is when a shape is selected, click any color on the color palette and it will change the shape's fill to that color. On the right side of the workspace is the Draw palette. The Draw palette will display all the colors that are currently being used in the design within the workspace. As an example, this drawing has 6 different objects with 6 different colors. Thus, as you can see, the colors are displayed in the Draw palette here. The benefit of this is that it helps us to keep the colors in our design consistent. We don't have to guess which color on the main color palette we have used. This is especially helpful if we need to reuse colors. Before we continue on with the other lessons, there's a setting that we should set before we start designing. The worst thing that can happen, and it does, is to lose all our work on a design due to a system failure. Therefore, it is always good to get in a habit of saving your designs frequently. There are times, though, where we get too involved with the design and we forget to save our design on a regular basis. In DesignR PRO 2, there's a setting that will save and make backups of our designs automatically. It is the Automatic Save feature. To get there, click on the Options pull-down menu, and then click Automatic Save. It will then bring up this little window. Selecting the first option will automatically save your designs on a regular basis, and it will do this in the background so you'll never see it happening. Then, if the system fails for some reason, you know that you're safe from losing all your hard work. Below that is the Automatic Load enabled. When this is enabled, it will restore the design up to the last automatic save, which is done every 5 minutes. The time can be set to a longer period or shorter period if need be. Both these choices should be checked and turned on. It will save you a lot of headaches later on. For extra assurance, the last selection in this box is Create Backup when saving. It will make a duplicate backup file every time you save the design, and this is helpful in case the original file for some reason ever gets corrupted or becomes unusable for some reason. Keep in mind though that manually saving your files is always a good habit, but this feature is just a little assurance in case you forget.